The ship had no name in any alien language. No translation matrix in the known galaxy could render it properly. The closest the Vilhari could manage, the oldest spacefaring civilization in the Orion Arm, a people who had mapped stars before humanity had learned to plant crops, was a guttural sound that meant roughly, the thing that should not move as fast as it does. But the humans called her the ISV Promethean Rage. And on the morning everything changed, she was sitting perfectly still at the edge of the Keth Nebula, running dark, no emissions, no active sensors, no transponder signal. To every telescope and scanner array in the Tarkhan hegemony's border fleet, that region of space was empty. It was not empty. Inside the Promethean Rage, 612 human beings were very, very quiet. Not the quiet of fear. Not the quiet of people waiting to be saved. The quiet of people who had already decided what they were going to do. People who had done the math, checked the numbers twice, said their private words to whatever they believed in, and were now simply waiting for the clock to reach zero. Captain Sarah Voss stood at the center of the combat bridge, both hands resting flat on the tactical rail, eyes fixed on the holo display floating in front of her. Her face was unreadable. Her knuckles were white. On the display, a single gold dot pulsed steadily. The Tarkhan processing station, Hegemony Outpost Keth 7, hung in orbit around a dead moon 340,000 kilometers away. 17 levels. Approximately 4,000 Tarkhan administrative personnel, soldiers, and contracted workers. And somewhere inside it, in a detention block the Hegemony hadn't officially acknowledged existed, 11 members of the Promethean Rage's crew were being held without charge, without trial, and without the basic protections guaranteed under the Galactic Compact that the Tarkhan Hegemony had signed 40 years ago with their own blood ink. 11 people. Chief Engineer Dara Okafor, Navigation Officer Tomas Reyes, 7 others from the Forward Survey Team, and 2 people who made Sarah Voss's jaw clench every time she thought about them. Ensign Priya Mehta, age 22, first deep space posting, and her husband, Corpsman Alexei Mehta, age 24, married 11 months ago. Sarah had given the toast at their wedding. The Tarkhan had seized them 6 days ago, called it a border incursion, said the survey team had crossed into restricted space, a claim that ISV navigation logs disproved down to the meter. The Hegemony's response to those logs had been to stop answering communications entirely. Earth Command had filed a formal diplomatic protest. The Hegemony had not responded. Earth Command had escalated to the Galactic Compact Oversight Council. The Council had opened a review. Estimated resolution 4 to 7 standard months. Standard. Sarah Voss had read that estimate, set it down on her desk, and gone to find Admiral Cho. She had made one request. 48 hours of operational independence. No orders, no oversight. Whatever happened in that window was between her crew, and whatever version of God had enough nerve to show up. The Admiral had looked at her for a long time. Then he had looked away, out the viewport, at the stars. "I don't know where you are, Captain," he had said quietly. "And I won't know for the next 48 hours. Comm relay in this sector is unreliable." Sarah had nodded once. "Understood, sir." That had been 31 hours ago. Now she checked the chrono on her wrist, looked up at her crew. Every face on that bridge, young faces, experienced faces, faces tight with controlled fury, turned toward her. She didn't give a speech. Sarah Voss was not a speech kind of woman. She said 4 words. "Bring them home now." And the ISV Promethean Rage lit up like a second sun. Every engine firing simultaneously. Every system powering from cold silence to full combat readiness in 4.3 seconds. A transition that, according to Tarkhan military doctrine, was physically impossible for a vessel of that class. Tarkhan doctrine was about to be updated. At Outpost Keth 7, a junior sensor officer named Drivak was halfway through a routine scan when every alarm on his board triggered at once. He stared at his readout, looked at it again, tapped the screen to make sure it wasn't frozen. It wasn't frozen. He hit the intercom with a shaking hand. "Command, there is a human warship. It appeared. It is already inside our defense perimeter. It is..." He checked the closing speed, checked it again. His next words came out very small. "It is not slowing down. The Tarkhan hegemony had been at war 3 times in the last 2 centuries. They were not a peaceful people by nature. Few species that reached the stars were. But they were a proud people, and pride had a way of making even experienced soldiers underestimate things they had never personally faced. The garrison commander of Outpost Keth 7, a heavy-set Tarkhan officer named Veth Durak, had read the intelligence files on human warships. He had attended the mandatory briefings after the Valgon incident, the incident no one in the hegemony liked to discuss, and he had filed the information away in the same mental drawer where he kept earthquake protocols and reactor meltdown procedures. Useful to know. Unlikely to ever matter. He was revising that assessment at high speed. The Promethean rage dropped sublight at a distance that Tarkhan naval doctrine classified as insane. Not aggressive, not bold. Clinically, medically, certifiably insane. She came out of her burn 200 kilometers off the station's primary docking face, so close that Keth 7's point defense systems triggered automatically and had to be manually overridden to prevent them from opening fire. She was enormous. That was the first thing Durak registered as the visual feed came up on his command deck. He had seen the schematics. The schematics had failed to prepare him. The Promethean Rage was 2.4 kilometers long and built like someone had taken the concept of a battering ram and scaled it up to planetary assault levels. She had no elegant curves, no aesthetic flourishes, none of the sweeping lines that characterized Tarkhan or Velhari capital ships. She was dense, brutal, and functional in the way that avalanches are functional, doing exactly what physics intended with maximum commitment. Her hull was scorched in places, old battle damage, partially repaired. This was not a ship kept behind glass. This was a ship that had been places and done things and was completely unbothered by what you thought about that, and she was pointing directly at the station. Every weapon port on her forward face was open. Durak counted them, stopped counting at 40, swallowed once. His communications officer looked at him. "They're hailing us, Commander." "Put it through." The voice that came over the channel was calm, dangerously calm, the kind of calm that isn't the absence of emotion, but the very careful containment of a tremendous amount of it. "Outpost Keth 7, this is Captain Sarah Voss of the ISV Promethean Rage, United Earth Navy. I'm going to keep this simple, because I think simple is better for everyone right now." Durak opened his mouth. Sarah kept talking. "You are holding 11 members of my crew in Detention Block 7, Sub-Level 4. You have held them for 6 days without charge, without legal counsel, and without notification to their families. This is a violation of Articles 7, 12, and 31 of the Galactic Compact, which your government signed and which I have loaded into my targeting computer as a reference document." A beat of silence. "You have 20 minutes to release all 11 personnel to the shuttle bay. They will come aboard unharmed, and I do mean unharmed, because my medical team will be running full scans the moment they're on deck, and I will know if anyone on your station has touched them. When my people are safe, I will withdraw. This station will remain intact. Your personnel will remain alive. Everyone goes home." Another pause. When she spoke again, something had shifted in her voice. Something that made the temperature on Durak's command deck feel like it had dropped several degrees. "But if those 11 people are not in that shuttle bay in 20 minutes, if 1 minute passes beyond that deadline, I want you to look out your forward viewport, Commander. Look at my ship. Really look at her. And I want you to understand something. She is not my most powerful vessel. She is not even in my top 5. She is the ship I sent because I was trying to be reasonable." The channel stayed open. Durak could hear faintly the background sounds of a combat bridge at full readiness, the low hum of charged systems, the quiet professional voices of crew running through checklists. People who had done this before, people who were not angry, people who were beyond angry in that cold, clear territory on the other side of it. His second-in-command leaned close. "Commander, what are your orders?" Veth Durak looked at the Promethean Rage on his screen. He looked at his 23 defensive cannons. He did some math. "Get me the detention block supervisor," he said quietly. "Tell them to start processing releases." It should have ended there. In a rational galaxy, it would have ended there. 11 people released, 1 warship withdrawn, a diplomatic incident filed away and quietly forgotten. The hegemony saves face by framing it as a voluntary release. Earth gets its crew back. Nobody dies. But Veth Durak was not the only person on Outpost Keth 7 with authority, and the man who outranked him had just arrived on the command deck. High Executor Marin Solv was not a military man. He was a political appointee, a career bureaucrat with the hegemony's interior ministry who had been stationed at Keth 7 for 8 months to oversee the processing operations that the hegemony officially didn't talk about. He was 61 years old, had never served in the military, had never been in a combat situation in his life, and had spent 4 decades watching governments back down from positions the moment real pressure was applied. He had concluded from this that pressure was almost always a bluff. He looked at the Promethean rage on the screen. He looked at Durak's order to begin processing releases. "Cancel that order," he said. Durak turned slowly. "Executor, that ship is one vessel." Solv straightened his collar. "We have a defense fleet 17 minutes away. Hegemony battle doctrine clearly states that a lone vessel, regardless of class, cannot successfully engage a defended station and an incoming fleet simultaneously. They are bluffing, Commander. They want to provoke an incident that justifies Earth expanding into this sector. If we release those prisoners, we validate their aggression and invite further incursions." Durak stared at him. "Sir, with respect, I have read the intelligence files on—" "I have also read them." Solv clasped his hands behind his back. "I found them sensationalist. Open a channel to that ship. Tell them their deadline is rejected. Tell them hegemony reinforcements are en route, and they should withdraw immediately or be considered a hostile combatant." Durak was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Sir," he said very carefully, "I need you to understand what I am about to tell you. Not as a formality. I need you to actually hear it." "I'm listening. The intelligence files you found sensationalist were written by Admiral Preth Vaughn. Admiral Vaughn personally observed human naval engagements at the Valgon incident, at the siege of Corridor 9, and at the Third Kethera engagement. He described the Valgon incident as—" Durak paused. "He described it as the single most psychologically destabilizing military event of his career. He retired 6 months later. He has not spoken publicly about it since." Solv blinked. "Your point?" "My point, Executor, is that Admiral Vaughn spent 40 years in the hegemony navy. He had seen everything." Durak looked back at the screen. At the Promethean rage, sitting there, patient, waiting. Everything except that. There was a pause. Solv sent the message anyway. On the bridge of the Promethean rage, Sarah Voss read the hegemony's response without changing expression. Around her, she felt her crew go very still. Navigator Chen, who had 3 younger siblings and called his mother every week without fail, set down his stylus with a small, precise click. Weapons Officer Bashir, who had been on this ship for 9 years and had never once raised his voice on duty, exhaled very slowly through his nose. Chief of Security Torres, who had personally trained 6 of the 11 people currently in Keth 7's detention block, put both hands on his console and looked at the floor for a moment. Sarah let the silence sit for exactly 5 seconds. Then she turned to Torres. "What's the detention block structure?" 4 levels below the main operations ring. Internal bulkheads are standard Tarkon administrative grade, not military reinforced. There are 2 guard rotations. Based on the patrol patterns we pulled from the station's external sensor bleed, current rotation change is in approximately 9 minutes. Structural weak points. Junction corridor on sub-level 3 connects directly to the emergency shuttle access. If we put a boarding team in through the secondary docking port, the one on their maintenance ring, which their defensive grid has a 17-degree coverage gap on, we have a path that avoids their main security checkpoints entirely. Sarah nodded slowly, looked at the station, looked at the countdown she'd given them, now showing 12 minutes remaining, still ticking on her secondary display. She hadn't stopped it. She had kept it running because part of her, the part that had given the toast at Priya and Alexi's wedding, the part that remembered Dara Okafor teaching her daughter to ride a bicycle on the station promenade, the part that had read Tom Reyes's last letter home because he'd asked her to keep a copy in case anything happened. That part was still hoping someone on that station would look at the clock and make a smarter choice. "Commander Yates," she said. Her Marine commander stepped forward. "Captain, take fire teams 1 through 4. Boarding configuration: non-lethal primary, lethal authorized in defense of rescued personnel. A pause. Bring them home. Yates met her eyes, nodded once. Yes, ma'am. As the Marine teams moved toward the assault bay, Sarah opened a channel to Keth 7 one more time. Her voice, when she spoke, was almost gentle. The way a doctor's voice is gentle when delivering a diagnosis that cannot be changed. Executor Solve, I know you're listening. I want you to know that what happens in the next 30 minutes is not what I wanted. I gave you every chance to make a different choice. She closed the channel. Helm, close to engagement range, weapons, active. Begin jamming their fleet relay beacon. I don't want reinforcements complicating my Marines' work. The Promethean rage moved forward. What happened next would be debated in Tarkhan military academies for a generation. Not because it was complicated, because it wasn't. Commander Yates's 4 fire teams hit Keth 7's maintenance ring at the 17-degree gap in the defensive grid, exactly as Torres had calculated. The breach took 11 seconds. Human boarding technology operating on principles the Tarkhan engineers, who later examined the entry point, would describe, baffled as aggressively pragmatic. The door wasn't hacked. It wasn't bypassed. It was simply no longer a door. The 2 security guards at the junction corridor on sublevel 3 saw 4 humans in black tactical armor, moving toward them at a pace that suggested the concept of caution had been left on the shuttle. They had a brief, intense conversation about their career choices and surrendered without incident. This was, in hindsight, the correct decision. The detention block supervisor, a Tarkhan sergeant named Hevath, heard the alarms, looked at his security feed, and did something that would later earn him a commendation from his own government and an unofficial note of appreciation from the United Earth Navy. He unlocked every cell on sub-level 4 and stood in the corridor with his hands up. I want it on record, he said to the first Marine through the door, that I told the executor this was a bad idea. The Marine, a scarred veteran named Kowalski who had been doing this for 16 years, looked at him for a moment. Noted, said Kowalski. Where are they? Hevath pointed. 11 people. Some bruised, some exhausted, all alive. Ensign Priameta, 22 years old, first deep space posting, looked up as the fire team came through the door and made a sound that Kowalski would not describe to anyone afterward, because there are some things that belong only to the people in the room. Alexei Mehta, 24 years old, married 11 months, had a split lip and a healing bruise across his left cheekbone. He looked at the Marines in the doorway. He looked at the patch on Kowalski's shoulder. The patch of the Promethean rage, the ship's crest, the one they all wore. The captain sent you, he said. It wasn't a question. The captain sent us, Kowalski confirmed. Alexei closed his eyes for a second, nodded once, got to his feet. Then let's go. Above, the Promethean rage was having a conversation with Keth 7's defensive systems. It was a short conversation. The station's 23 defensive cannons were functional, well-maintained, and crewed by trained Tarkhan soldiers. Under normal circumstances, against a conventional attacker, they would have presented a serious obstacle. The Promethean rage was not a conventional attacker. She moved through the defensive fire with the unhurried confidence of something that had calculated exactly how much damage it could absorb and found the number acceptable. Her point defense systems handled the incoming fire in real time, not suppressing it, not evading it, just dealing with it, the way you deal with rain by wearing a coat. She was not trying to destroy the station. This was important, and the Tarkhan gunners, professional soldiers who understood the difference between a ship trying to kill you and a ship making sure you stay too busy to threaten someone else, gradually understood what they were seeing. The Promethean rage wasn't fighting the station. She was occupying it, keeping every gun barrel pointed at her, keeping every sensor array focused on her, keeping the entire defensive apparatus of Keth 7 engaged and busy and unable to look at anything else. While 4 fire teams walked out of the detention block, through the maintenance corridors, back to the breach point, and onto their shuttle with 11 rescued crew members. The shuttle docked with the Promethean rage at 18 minutes and 44 seconds after Sarah had opened her first channel. 1 minute and 16 seconds before her deadline. Sarah watched the docking confirmation light go green on her board. She let out a breath she had been holding quietly, where no one could see it. All personnel confirmed aboard? She asked. All personnel confirmed aboard, Torres said. Medical team has them. Everyone's alive. Alexei Mehta has non-critical injuries. Everyone else is... He paused, cleared his throat. Everyone else is okay, Captain. Sarah nodded. She looked at Keth 7 on her display. At the defensive cannons that had been firing at her ship for the last 18 minutes and had accomplished approximately nothing except creating a light show. She thought about Executor Solve, somewhere on that station, watching his plan collapse in real time. She opened one final channel. Executor, my crew is aboard. I'm withdrawing as promised. A pause. You should know that I'm filing a full incident report with the Galactic Compact Oversight Council. Every communication log, every navigation record, every medical scan of my recovered personnel. The review that was going to take 4 to 7 months, I suspect it will move somewhat faster now, given that I'll also be including the sensor records of this station's detention levels. Another pause. Quieter. The 11 people you held were surveyors, scientists, a corpsman and his wife on their first deployment. They had done nothing wrong. They were never a threat to you. Remember that. The next time your government looks at a human crew and tries to calculate how much it can get away with, remember that those people have names, and they have ships, and those ships have crews who know those names. She closed the channel. Helm, she said, take us home. The Tarkon hegemony's official statement, released 40 hours later, described the incident as a miscommunication regarding border jurisdiction and announced the voluntary release of 11 Earth personnel following a productive dialogue. No one believed this. Everyone pretended to. This is occasionally how diplomacy works. High Executor Marin Solve was reassigned to an administrative post on a hegemony interior station so far from the border that it didn't appear on most navigational charts. This was described as a promotion. No one believed this either. Keth Durak was quietly awarded the hegemony's second highest military citation, the one given for exceptional judgment under extreme operational pressure. The citation's classified annex noted that his recommendation to comply with the Promethean Rage's demands had been overruled, and that the actual outcome of the incident was largely attributable to human restraint rather than hegemony defense capability. He framed it anyway. It still meant something. The Galactic Compact Oversight Council's review of hegemony border detention practices was completed in 11 days. 11 days, not 7 months. Several significant policy changes followed. On the Promethean Rage, 3 days out from Keth 7, Dr. Ayana Park cleared the last of the recovered crew from medical and sent them back to their quarters with instructions to sleep, eat, and bother her again only if something was actively on fire. Priya Mehta sat on the edge of a medical bay cot for a while after her clearance, not quite ready to move. Alexei sat beside her, their shoulders touching, not talking. Chief Engineer Dara Okafor stopped by on her way back to the engine room. She hadn't officially been cleared for duty yet and did not care, to squeeze Priya's shoulder and say, "Come find me when you're ready to get back to work. I've got a plasma conduit with your name on it." Priya laughed. It was small and rough and surprised out of her. It was the best sound anyone on that ship had heard in 6 days. Captain Sarah Voss filed her incident report, filed her medical reports, filed her navigation logs, filed every piece of documentation required by regulation, and several pieces that weren't strictly required, but that she included anyway because she believed in being thorough. Then she went to her cabin, sat in the chair by the viewport, and watched the stars for a while. She thought about the Galactic Compact, about the 4 to 7 month timeline, about the 11 people who would have spent those months in a detention block on Sub-Level 4 while bureaucracies exchanged formal correspondence. She thought about what the galaxy sometimes forgot about human beings, what it kept having to relearn, incident by incident, engagement by engagement, that humans were genuinely a reasonable people, patient, diplomatic, committed to process and procedure and the peaceful resolution of disputes, right up until they weren't. And when they weren't, when the clock ran out, when the channels went silent, when someone made the catastrophic miscalculation of confusing human restraint for human weakness, there was nothing in the known galaxy that moved quite like a human warship with an angry crew and a captain who knew exactly where her people were. The stars outside the viewport burned on, indifferent and eternal. The Promethean rage flew home.